ThreatLocker implements a least privileged approach to cybersecurity, blocking every executable unless specifically authorized by your team. This methodology mitigates ransomware, supply chain attacks, and zero-day exploits, and ensures 24/7, 365 protection for your organization. To learn more about how ThreatLocker can help prevent known and unknown threats in your digital environment, safeguard your data and operations from threat actors, and align your organization with respected compliance frameworks, visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker. Do your end users always, and I mean always without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at securityweekly.com/1Password. That's the number 1Password. Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Jason Albuquerque. All right, Jason, going to get into the weekly articles.
Let's do it.
We did the football overview earlier, so I think we're good on that one. All right, this first article, I loved it, right? So AI can mostly outperform human CEOs.
This was a great article, right? And just a little bit of context on it. It was about 6 months of kind of a taste test, and it took university students and put them through simulations. And it was really a digital twin of a U.S. automotive industry. And these students, these players, got to make strategic decisions about this company. And, you know, they were actually able to make market changes and make strategic changes and really play the role of the CEO. And the goal of the game was to not get fired, right? That was the goal. Don't get fired by the board. And, you know, it was pretty amazing that the LLM consistently outperformed a lot of its human counterparts, not all of them, but it was in certain situations, which I thought was very, very cool to kind of see that the human factor still needed to be involved, right? Because it was like those, they called it the black swan events, right? Market collapses and the pandemic and all of those things where you really need that human touch. But really anything that was controlled, you know, the AI outperformed the humans, which is pretty wild.
Yeah, and what I thought was interesting is when the AI performs really well consuming massive amounts of data, right? And that's what it's really, really good at, right?
Absolutely.
So it can consume a lot of data, can take a lot of market data, a lot of data, and based off that data, make very accurate decisions, which is actually really, really interesting when you think about it from a historical and see shifts in the market of how you can make decisions. Where it falls down is when you need the human element for those kind of disruption events or those events that don't have a lot of data model behind them, right?
Yeah.
And what I took away from this, Jason, is these are really valid use cases of how AI can be used and leveraged in corporate America, right? Is
100%.
Let the LLM present you with a set of recommendations, right? That based off the data, surface up with enough kind of evidence behind it, and then let the human then address the human component of that and make the final decision, right? Like that's a really, really solid use case.
Absolutely. It's the force multiplier that we always talk about, right? Having the ability to have that strategic information at your fingertips and be able to use it for your organization. But, you know, the article did go through all of these points that are very, very important. Like you had mentioned, data quality is crucial. Being able to build out that digital twin of your organization so the LLM has the right information to be working off of. You have to be able to look at the efficiency that it gives you versus the risk that gets presented to you. And that's where the human factor comes in. You know, this may be a risky decision that's getting recommended to me. How am I going to handle that? And then, I mean, there's no accountability or responsibility for an AI LLM. So you need to be able to have someone who's accountable for the business, right? So it's not going to replace a CEO. It's not going to replace a leader. It's a force multiplier that CEO or leader has at their fingertips.
Yeah, I think the best use cases for AI are to analyze that data, make a set of recommendations with supporting evidence. And you have to look through that evidence, right? There's a trust
Right.
of the data and a trust of the output that we still have to get through as an industry, but it can be used to augment human
Right.
based decision making, which I think is where the power of this is actually work that we're working on internally because we see this, right? When you
Yep.
think about the cybersecurity challenge and all the data elements, we're actually modeling those data elements to teach it how to understand how a vulnerability impacts controls and risks, right? Like that's some of the innovation research that Patrick's working on. We talked about a few weeks ago. It's a great use case. And same thing with CEOs, same thing for CFO. Like you could take any executive position and use combinations of these high scale data processing AI engines to create a set of recommendations that then humans can make decisions off of. And I think that's a really interesting way to balance AI and leadership or other human activity.
Yep. 100% agreed.
The big one that came out is the potential disruption of strategy consulting, which means that all the big four and a few others might
That's
might
right.
have some
That's right.
challenges in the future because AI might replace
All those
them.
business consultants, yeah, they're gonna have a little bit cheaper tool, in front of them to be able to leverage.
Right. There go your billable hours. The chat
Right,
GPT
exactly,
4.0 just
exactly.
replaced you. Yeah. Fair warning for all of our big strategic consulting agencies. Anyways. Next article, underfunding and leadership gaps weaken cybersecurity defenses. You think?
You think? I know, and I mean, this is what we see all the time, right? We talk about this all the time. Cybersecurity gaps. The attack surface is expanding. The threats are increasing. But then, we have these results where it says 48% of respondents say their leadership doesn't consider cybersecurity to be their responsibility, right? That's a huge gap. I mean, it's you have 96% of IT leaders that they surveyed saying that they're concerned about the existing attack surface, but we're not investing, but we're not making it a priority, right? So,
No.
it's we're still chasing our tail, Matt. We're still chasing our tails.
Yeah, and I look through some of this data result, right? And we know the underfunding because
Mm-hmm.
we see it, right? I mean, you
Yep.
see it, I see it. We know there's leadership gaps, right? We've talked about CISOs leaving the position and nobody backfilling them.
Right.
Even in this survey, it's like who's responsible,
I know.
right? The
I know.
the CEO 42%, the CIO 34%, the CISO 26%, or the CFO 20%. Like that we can't even agree who's responsible for
Exactly.
cybersecurity.
Exactly. Exactly. And then you have the other side of it where it's saying, the cyber criminal underground is worth trillions of dollars these days. So we have
Mhm.
a big business, right, against this, I don't know, mentality about cybersecurity that is completely all over the place. There's no
What?
consensus anywhere.
No, I mean the best consensus we have is you won't spend any money until you're actually breached,
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it'll be
right?
reactive. It'll be
It'll
reactive.
be
We'll
completely
talk.
reactive.
We'll talk about an article, that's reactive in nature coming up pretty
Yeah.
soon.
Yes, we will. But see, that's the problem. If we're
Yeah.
if we can't figure out who owns it, we don't have a CISO, nobody can agree who owns it, which means we're not doing anything about it. We're not going to
Right.
do anything about it until we get breached. Then we're behind the gun
That's
like
right.
United Healthcare,
Yep.
and they have to basically start over with their entire
Right.
IT set of systems because that's how bad it was.
100% reactive.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yes. We're still there. They're almost 30 years later.
I know.
Oh, we
Uh,
can preach all day long, baby, but I
I
guess we're
know.
just
I know.
preaching to the choir.
Just keep preaching.
Oh, yes. Next article, a self-care checklist for leaders.
Yeah, especially in the
Um,
cybersecurity world, we need it based on
oh
everything we just
yeah.
talked about.
Yep. If you're a chief information security officer, this is the article you need to
It's the
read
article.
because
No doubt
everything
about
else
it.
is depressing.
That's right. 100%. And Matt, I love these. I love these articles because, in such a high stress role, being able to take a step back and think of yourself and make sure you're taking care of yourself, because we all know if you want to be a successful leader and you want to be able to take care of your team, you need to be taking care of yourself. Otherwise, you're
Yeah.
not setting yourself up for success and you can't take care of your team, right? If you're distressed, you can't be taking, you can't be taking care of your team. So there's so many aspects of that. I mean, I love the fact that this article started off with, yes, there are many impediments to this. Your personality, your culture, your organizational culture, societal pressures. Yes, we get it. There's pressures, but you want to know what? Give yourself permission to take care of yourself. That's
Yeah.
number one. If your head's not in the game and you don't allow yourself to take care of yourself, you're never going to get it done. You're always going to make excuses. You're always going to kick the can down the road. So, number one is be okay with it. You deserve it.
Yeah, it was funny this weekend. My wife and I went down to Fredericksburg. We've been nonstop since the house flood, right? Like nonstop, Jason, right? House flooded June 5th. We've been GCing it. I work a full-time job, all the other stuff going on. And she finally said, you know what? We just need a weekend to ourselves.
Yep.
Like, let's just go. Like, nobody's in the house for the first time. And I can't remember how long. Like, we haven't let a contractor into the house. So she booked the weekend, went down to Fredericksburg, and we just spent the weekend together. It was great because we forgot about everything, right? It's just like all the stresses of house rebuild, work. I just was traveling last week. I'm traveling this week again. It's a perfect little break, but you got to carve those times out, because if you don't, you're never going to get yourself in check, right?
That's right. Yeah, you never will. And it's another good point in this article was meet yourself where you are. So that's a perfect example right there. You're running 1,000 miles an hour, family, work, everything going on, all the pressures of life, and you took a step back and said, you know what? Let's do something that's small and steady, like they pointed out here, right? Weekend break. Let's just
weekend break.
Start with that, right? Start with a weekend break. Just know where you are and be able to take a break and say, you know what? I'm taking a timeout. Even if it's only for a couple days, 3 days, whatever the case may be, taking a timeout, and a point in here is avoid the all or nothing. It's not all or nothing.
No.
Right? It's not all or nothing. It's making priorities within your life to be able to take breaks and being okay with it.
Yep. Even when I tried to do nothing, it never ends up being nothing anyways.
No,
you know
because
what I mean?
Like, there's certain personalities, and I'm sure you're a lot like me, where part of your sanity is making sure that you're productive, and part of being productive is work, right? So a great break for me is, spending a couple of hours or 3 hours of work time while I'm disconnected. For me, that's a good balance, because I know things are going on. I know I'm still being productive. I know I'm still, helping out the organization, but I'm able to disconnect, and it's not as stressful. It's not as high priority. It's on your terms.
Yep. Agreed. All right. Next article, the surge in cyber insurance and what it means for your business. Now, this is kind of a collection of different stats around cyber insurance, but here's what I'm going to put out there that's not in here. So we had our customer advisory board last week, and one of our clients went to one of the big insurance conferences. Do you know what the average payout on a cyber policy is?
Average payout. Let's see.
Well, no. Sorry, let me take that back. The average number of policies that get paid out.
I'm gonna be doom and gloom. Let me call it 40%. I don't know. This is a total guess.
It's just under 40%.
Wow. Ding, ding, ding. Albuquerque gets it right.
Yeah.
And now,
just
you want to know what?
40...
That was my doom and gloom answer, Matt.
I know. So just put that stat. You have cyber insurance. You are less than likely 40% likely that policy will get paid out if you have a breach.
Wow. And now couple that with some of the stats that are in this article. Mm-hmm. They're predicting a growth in cyber insurance, right, by 2034. And the top tier was 30% growth, up to 109 billion US cyber premiums. Holy Lord. And only 40% of that's going to get paid out. I mean,
less than
40%.
Less than 40% of those policies are going to get paid out.
I know. Well, that makes me feel a little bit better that only 29% of respondents said that they have cyber insurance.
Yeah.
When I couple it with that.
But here we talked about this in the last segment. What do insurance companies do by default? Deny.
It's
the first thing they deny.
They
right?
Deny. They'll find any reason
because they're going to look for the out.
Yep,
so what people need to realize that just because you have a cyber insurance policy doesn't mean it's going to get paid if you run into an event. You better look at all the exclusions, That was the
right.
moral of the story is you got to look at all the exclusions. Just because you have a policy and you think you're going to get paid, less than 40% of those policies are getting paid. So
Yep.
you've got to be very cognizant of the exclusions and what's in those policies if you are using cyber insurance to bridge a gap.
That's right. And the other piece too is when you fill out their questionnaires to be able to get it, make sure you're being 100% accurate, because if you're not, and they realize that you answered yes to a certain control question that you really didn't have that in play, you're going to get denied right out of the gate. So, it's the diligence on the contract reading, but it's also the diligence of providing the information that's truthful information about the posture of your organization. Because if not, straight out of the gate, deny.
Yeah, agreed. And that's why you see so many people trying to get access to some level of real-time data to try to figure this stuff out. We've been talking to a few of the brokers because they all are trying to get a better idea of what controls are in place, what the potential risks are, so they can price these policies better. But yeah, if you're answering the questionnaire and you misrepresent a control, they're going to use it if you ever run into an event. And I think that's why the payout on policies is so low.
Yeah. No. One of the things that, I mean, it wasn't a huge surprise, but I was still pretty surprised that it was still high up there, right? So 56% of the claims were still things like business email compromise, transfer of funds, social engineering. The train is still running. The train is still running on the social engineering. I don't know. I had hopes we would get better over the course of the last year, but
it's still the easy stuff.
It is.
Jason.
It's the easy button. Absolutely.
It's the easy stuff. That's why you still see them. Yeah, ransomware has risen, but we haven't got rid of the basic attacks yet either. So we're no better. Yeah. Yep. All right. So this is what happens when you get hacked.
That's right. Reactive.
Senate. Yep. Here's the reactive. Senate bill eyes minimum cybersecurity standards for healthcare industry. So can anybody say HIPAA, first of all?
I know.
Right? We had so here's where I think HIPAA failed a little bit, right? So there are security requirements at a high level, kind of like Sarbanes-Oxley, in the HIPAA requirements when we passed the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, right? Yep. No one enforced those for the longest time. No precedents, no fines, no nothing. HHS finally starts to get going. Then we have these major breaches, right? So what do we do in response? We create yet another Health Insurance Security and Accountability Act. So instead of HIPAA, we now have HISA. To try to deal with this, because the first time we attempted this wasn't, I guess, strong enough, predictive enough, prescriptive enough. Like what?
Probably all of the above, and now it's a knee-jerk reaction to what just happened, right? I mean, the Change Healthcare scenario got all of our politicians up in a tizzy. And now they're gonna legislate, right? They're gonna do what they do. They're gonna come down with the gavel and legislate. One of the comments
go ahead. No, go.
I was just gonna say one of the comments that I was surprised that got thrown out there in public was, one of the senators, Wyden, came out and said these are common sense reforms, including jail time for CEOs that lied to government about their cybersecurity. Whoa! Did they come out blazing on that one?
Oh, they did. So I pulled open the regulation because I wanted to see what was in it. Like, what's different, right? So you open this thing up and there's security requirements. And they're basically, it looks like they're going to lean on CISA and the DNI to come up with a minimum set of security requirements for healthcare, and then an optional set of enhanced security requirements in certain situations. But again, this is a law and it's not very prescriptive. So it's really hard to tell, like, what are the current minimum security requirements? I think they're yet to be determined. Yeah. This act would go into effect 2 years after it was passed, if it gets passed, which gives, I guess, CISA and DNI time to come up with the requirements. But what it's missing here, Jason, so to me, this looks a lot like HIPAA in some respects, right? Where there's not specificity, but it looks like they're going to delegate specificity to CISA and DNI to come up with the requirements that can then be enforced. And it looks like it's being enforced through Social Security, actually. It's weird because...
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're modifying the Social Security Act is part of this. So it's interesting. It's almost like giving Social Security because it says
They're
the
going to have the
secretary, and I'm like,
regulatory
well, which
oversight of this?
that's, that's how I kind of read it.
I'm
Yeah, it's
gonna
kind of
break it open and take a look. But that would be
yeah.
very interesting if Social Security has the regulatory oversight on healthcare
Because it
organizations.
says, yeah, it says in general, section 1173D1 of the Social Security Act, 42 USC 1320D-2D1 is amended as follows. And it lays out all this stuff. And then it says the secretary is responsible for enforcing it. So that leads me to believe that this falls under the domain of Social Security, which is not where I would have expected it, by the way.
No, not
So
at all.
yeah. And then there's some provisions in the end around Medicare assistance to address cybersecurity incidents. So I didn't dig into this one yet, but it's a little. I had a session on this at our Stronger conference 2 weeks ago about the healthcare attacks and kind of what was coming. And we thought Medicare and Medicaid could be enforcement arms around this. So if you don't meet the minimum security requirements or enhanced security requirements, you could use your Medicare or Medicaid funding, right? Which would be a huge enforcement mechenism in healthcare, by the way.
Yep.
But this is written like Medicare is going to provide assistance. So I'm like, wait a minute, where's these dollars coming from? Because the last time I looked, the Medicare, Medicaid programs weren't highly funded. So where is all this money going to come from?
And I mean, we're having conversations around those programs going bankrupt eventually.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a huge concern these days. But there's going to have to be investment somewhere. I mean, that's one of the main notes that I took here is that, you know, you're going to have these massive healthcare organizations that can probably fund some of this on their own, if not all, right? But there's going to be disparities with some of these smaller community healthcare organizations that in no way, shape, or form do they have, maybe they're nonprofit even. No way do they have the funds to do this. So the federal government's going to have to pony up. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and it looks like they're going to try to fund some of that out of Medicare. I'm just saying, but that's not a program that, like we just said, has a lot of extra funds laying around to support this. So, yeah,
it's the same. It's, you know, it's trying to get blood from a stone. It's just a different stone, right? Because you have you have these nonprofits that aren't going to be able to afford it, but yeah, you know, the writing on the wall says Medicare can't afford it either. So. Right.
So I really thought Medicare and Medicaid could be an enforcement mechanism for this. That if you weren't, you know, then you could lose your ability to get funded through those programs, which would impact a lot of hospitals, which would be the carrot, right, for them to go through and get this. So there's still some work to do here. I have not looked to see if the thing has any chance in hell of getting through or not, but I mean, it has been introduced in the Senate.
I mean, I would see some, just because of the level of media attention this has gotten, the amount of eyebrows it's raised, the amount of disruption that it had. I have a feeling something's going to pass. It may be, you know, a bunch of negotiation going back and forth, and this bill may not be anything like it looks like now, but I would think something would pass.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was a major disruption. Lots of money lost on this one. So I could see it. Anyways, yeah, I knew it was coming because it was kind of hinted in my session a couple weeks ago that legislation was coming. And as soon as I saw this on Friday, I'm like, yeah, we're going to pull this into the show. Yep. All right. Last article, 41% concerned about job security due to skills gap. I think we talked about this one. Leadership skills rank highest for workplace success.
Wow, I think, how long have we been doing this podcast together? I think we've been talking about the entire time, my friend. 6 years, yeah. Leadership skills, communication skills, emotional intelligence, soft skills, all of those things we've been talking about for a long time outweigh the technical skills all day long, right? And it's the conversation of, you want to bring someone in who has the right attitude, the right aptitude, and can learn the technical skills. They have to be able to communicate. They have to have that leadership skill. They have to have the emotional intelligence. Otherwise, you can't put them in front of other human beings to collaborate, right? So, you know, those are the core skills that we need. As long as the aptitude is there, you can teach the technology. You can teach the technical skills.
Yes, absolutely. And we even covered an article similar to this last week about how low the technical skills were in organizations rate AI training average or poor. Right. Because it's not, I mean, at this point, we're still early into the AI days. So you know, I don't take this and what do we cover? Like 0.2% of all job postings have artificial intelligence skill sets in them. Like it's still not mainstream majority. So I'm not surprised by that. But the leadership, the soft skills, those communications things, the things we focus on this segment of the podcast are the skills you need in the job market today.
We've known this forever, right? And the part that concerned me the most is you know, the 95% of who they surveyed said that their organization has a talent development program. But only 25% of them say it's even effective at all, right? They don't have the time, the learning formats suck, and the leadership support isn't there. So, so how are those going to be successful? They're not. Priorities.
We tried, Jason.
We continue. We continue to try.
As
someone
always,
will listen someday.
Yes, sir. Yes, maybe. But here, I listen to you. Thank you for joining me. It's always a pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. We'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.